Why did my stepdad choose his job interview over taking me to the ER? The cramps started during third period chemistry while Mr. Albright was explaining covalent bonds, and at first I thought maybe I'd just eaten something bad at breakfast. But within 10 minutes the pain had intensified from uncomfortable to genuinely alarming, radiating from my lower right abdomen in waves that made me grip the edge of my lab table until my knuckles went white. My lab partner Destiny noticed me sweating and asked if I was okay, and I tried to say yes, but another cramp hit, and I doubled over, nearly knocking a beaker of solution onto the floor. Mr. Albright stopped mid-sentence and came over, taking one look at my face and immediately writing me a pass to the nurse's office. I gathered my things with shaking hands and walked slowly down the empty hallway, each step sending jolts of pain through my side. The school nurse, Mrs. Kowalski, had me lie down on the vinyl cot and started asking questions while pressing gently on my abdomen. When she touched the lower right side, I actually cried out, and her expression shifted from concerned to seriously worried. She took my temperature, and it was 101.3, which she said, combined with the location and severity of the pain, meant she needed to call my parents immediately. I gave her my mom's work number first, but it went to voicemail after 6 rings. Mrs. Kowalski left a message saying it was urgent and then asked for another contact. I hesitated before giving her my stepdad Derek's number because he'd made it clear he didn't want to be bothered during work hours unless it was a genuine emergency, and I wasn't sure this qualified even though the pain was making me nauseous and dizzy. Derek answered on the third ring with an irritated "what?" that I could hear from across the room. Mrs. Kowalski introduced herself and explained that I was in her office with severe abdominal pain and fever, and that she believed I needed to be evaluated at an emergency room as soon as possible. There was a long pause, and then Derek asked if she was sure it was an emergency or if I was just trying to get out of class. Mrs. Kowalski's jaw tightened and she said in a very professional voice that yes, she was quite sure, and that the symptoms I was displaying were consistent with appendicitis or another serious abdominal condition. Derek sighed loudly and said he was in the middle of something important and couldn't leave right now. Mrs. Kowalski asked if there was anyone else who could come get me, and Derek said my mom was at work too and I'd just have to wait. The nurse's expression shifted to disbelief, and she said that waiting was not advisable, and that if no parent could come, she would need to call an ambulance. That got Derek's attention, and his voice got sharp, saying absolutely not to call an ambulance because our insurance had a huge deductible and we'd be stuck with a massive bill. Mrs. Kowalski started to respond, but Derek cut her off, saying he'd figure something out and would call back in a few minutes. He hung up before she could say anything else. The nurse looked at me with an expression that was part sympathy and part frustration and told me to lie still while we waited. The pain was getting worse, coming in shorter intervals now, and I curled on my side trying to find any position that helped. Mrs. Kowalski gave me a cold compress and said she was going to give them exactly 10 minutes before she called 911, regardless of what Derek said, because my symptoms were too serious to ignore. Derek called back after 8 minutes and said he'd come get me, but he needed to stop by the house first to change clothes and print some documents. Mrs. Kowalski asked why he needed to do those things when I required immediate medical attention, and Derek's voice got defensive, saying he had a job interview at 2 o'clock that he'd been trying to schedule for 3 months, and he wasn't about to show up straight from home in jeans. The nurse started to argue, but Derek talked over her, saying the interview was for a senior management position that would basically double his salary and set our family up financially, and that he'd take me to the ER right after. Mrs. Kowalski said that was unacceptable and that my condition could not wait 2 or 3 hours, but Derek insisted it would be fine and he'd be at the school in 20 minutes. He hung up again before she could protest further. The nurse stood there looking angrier than I'd ever seen her, and then she turned to me and asked if I understood how serious the situation was. I nodded, still curled in a ball, and she said she wanted to call an ambulance, but legally she needed parental permission unless I was literally unconscious or in cardiac arrest. Derek arrived 37 minutes later, not 20, and I could tell he'd showered and changed into a suit because his hair was still damp. Mrs. Kowalski met him at her office door and tried to hand him printed information about appendicitis symptoms and the nearest emergency room, but he waved it away saying he knew where the hospital was. She said he needed to take me there immediately, not after his interview, and Derek's face got that closed-off expression he always wore when someone questioned his decisions. He said he appreciated her concern, but he was the parent and he'd make the decisions about my medical care. Mrs. Kowalski's voice got very quiet and controlled as she said that delaying treatment for a possible appendicitis could result in the appendix rupturing, which could cause sepsis and potentially death. Derek actually laughed and said she was being dramatic. The kids complained about stomach aches all the time and it was usually nothing. He signed me out and told me to get up and come with him. I tried to stand and immediately felt dizzy, grabbing the edge of the cot for support. Derek sighed impatiently and told me to hurry up. He was already running late. That's when things got a lot worse. Full story is linked below or on my channel.